Now on to the Hhs Buyers Club. You've heard me talk about the federal-wide, so the first thing I'm going to tell you about the Hhs version is it's slightly different. The federal-wide Buyers Club focuses on the entire federal community and is not restricted to IT services. It's restricted to, in general, innovative acquisitions. When we started the Hhs Buyers Club and launched it, we knew initially we were only going to focus on IT services because that in and of itself is a large project and a large cadre to focus on. Here we have the 11 operating divisions of Hhs. I know every agency has centers and bureaus and different things. We have different operating divisions. They operate on their own, and so we try to offer the best value we can possibly to support them. This is what you see when you go to the Buyers Club landing page. Once there, you'll see a variety of tabs and guides to help you. We put a lot of artifacts on there. We plan to increase those. As Brian mentioned earlier in reference to Standards Group and the Chaos Manifesto, by and large, probably by show of hands in the room, I imagine a lot of you wouldn't know whether or not an IT service contract failed unless it was the size of healthcare.gov. Most people don't know whether the budget analyst or the mission end user or the procurement officer, really what fails and what doesn't, how far above budget do we go, what impact it has. We don't really have those metrics and have that capability in our acquisition systems, nor do we collaborate and share with each other on how to improve those, which is, again, why we're all sitting here. Now, even though the statistics indicate that a large percentage above 10 million fail, that doesn't exclude the ones less than 10 million, because plenty of those fail. I get calls constantly, and I'm sure my colleagues in this room do too, that a website development effort for $1 million has failed for one reason or another. So we get into talking about solutions. You see here, we're trying to re-engineer the acquisition process. There are a lot of different models out there, and we'll see a number of different ones emerge as we all learn and grow further. My approach comes from my background in procurement, in knowing that program sees budget and sees procurement as a barrier, and procurement and other service-related groups see program as not really knowing what they're doing and doesn't invite them early on into the fold to help them. And oftentimes in the past, probably 6 months, I've gone to different groups and tried to persuade them to use some innovative methods. Well, the classic response I get from program is, we'd love to try something like this, but our procurement shop would never go for it. Okay. And then I go to procurement shops, and they say, we'd love to try something like this, but the program office would never go for it. Well, that's not true. But the thing is, when you all sit in different areas and you're not embedded together, you don't collaborate, you work in silos, you don't know what's possible. You don't know what happens outside your division. You know what happens in your operating division. You don't know what happens across the agency. You don't know what happens at GSA or USDS or at commerce or at agriculture. You have no clue what goes on because we just don't share and we don't communicate as well. So there's a lot of ways to improve this, and you see some of the solutions here. We want to utilize these methods. We want to engage and empower the workforce to collaborate. So as you can see here, we have a variety of Buyers Club goals and objectives. We have an entire strategy and execution plan. It's pretty ambitious, I won't lie. I scaled it back. That being said, we do want to test innovative acquisition methods. We really want to test one in each operating division before the end of fiscal year 15. We've already accomplished some of that goal already. We have a lot in the pipeline. Some will take longer than a year. Some we can handle before the year is out. We also want to develop newer, easier, more effective models and processes that work for not only procurement and not only program, but for all stakeholders. And that includes contractors, or as some would call them, vendors. The entire acquisition lifecycle involves a lot of different people, and they all need to be well aware of what's going on and the changes coming down the pipeline. Lastly, we want to engage all stakeholders, as I mentioned, and I'll show you a little more about that coming up. So we have an approach to leveraging resources. We have a diagram I'll show you shortly. It's basically in beta or alpha, and we're trying to gain more feedback from the community, and not just within HHS, but federal-wide, so we can continue to improve that. One of the things we also want to do that I've not been able to yet with time limitations is to really devote a lot of time and effort to reaching out to the operating divisions and spend time with a lot of them. Program, procurement, et cetera, hopefully in larger audiences rather than small ones initially. Because the Hhs Buyers Club, for the most part, I am the strategic liaison, and I do a lot of hand-holding and helping and connecting people to the right people within their division to help them. But as one person, you really can't do a lot. So what I'm trying to create gradually are sort of mini Buyers Club groups within each of the operating divisions. You can call them a work group, subject matter experts, what have you. But I think it's important to have procurement experts, IT experts, good program end users, people who have been involved with this, because each operating division, like each agency, operates very differently culturally, operationally, and there's no way I could tell you really how to navigate NIH versus ARC versus FDA as opposed to CDC. They're all very, very different, and so it's important to have people within those groups who really understand how to navigate these approaches and how to utilize them appropriately, and to know who to contact when they need some assistance. One of the things I'm working with USDS and GSA on to collaborate with is to identify common barriers, best practices, lessons learned, potential pitfalls for IT services, because we feel like that will really benefit everyone. All subject matter experts, all stakeholders, whether you're internal or external to the government, those kind of things will help you to learn and to grow. And right now, we don't really have those. So this is the diagram. And this really evolved out of what the White House put together, the innovative contracting case studies, formerly the playbook. I know it's small and you probably can't read it very well, but I'm happy to share it with you via email or on our landing page. The middle piece basically lays out the primary methods listed in the contracting case studies. And what I tried to do was to go in and to add some decision points that would help people navigate their way to which one or two innovative acquisition approaches might work best for you. And that's the central piece. On the left side, which you rarely see, is what Brian and a lot of others have sort of been advocating for, is this collaboration. Obviously, like any entrepreneurial organization or any mission-focused organization, you have to identify a problem or a need at the beginning. But what typically happens is that group will identify it, will fill all the requirements, will develop a solution, whatever they want to do. And then by the time they submit it and put the requisition in, it goes through this thread process where different people approve it. But most of those folks have no idea what that requisition is all about. And it eventually passes all the hurdles and gets to procurement. And by that time, they're behind the 8 ball, the clock is ticking. They're going to go to the go-to mechanisms to get the job done. They would like to try new things, they just don't have the wherewithal to do them. And it's really too late to get the buy-in to try something new. So what really needs to happen here, and what I'm advocating for here in this first column, is to take those advisory service groups, those SMEs, and to bring them in at the beginning, when you're truly identifying what your need is, to help you with market research, because those folks really do want to help you if you're on the program side. And I can tell you from countless experiences where at CDC, when I was invited to a lab, prior to an acquisition, or invited abroad for a conference or to help develop contracts and acquisition policies, it really makes a huge difference when you invite those folks who are really going to help you throughout the entire process. Invite them early and often up front to help you carry this ball forward to the goal line. On the right side is a column that's still in development, which basically we want to address federal appropriations law impacts. What is the best implementation tool to use, so forth and so on. The long-term goal here, of course, is to take this diagram, to constantly iterate and evolve, but to make it very web-centric with links. So as much as I love, and I have read multiple times, the long, innovative contracting case studies, some people don't have the time to do it, but also you could go and click on these methods or highlight any of these areas and get specific case studies and methods and best practices that will help you determine and help you educate yourself and your peers on how to best navigate your acquisition. Now I'm going to shift to the one use case that we had, the first use case that went to award. I consider a use case to be fully done once it's fully implemented and closed out, but we're not there yet. There's a group within the Office of the Secretary. It's the Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation, which we call ASPE. This was their current site. It was a legacy-based system. They needed to contract for a new web content management system, new external-facing website, intranet, and some databases. This was all based on old legacy, cold fusion coding structure that was costing them so much money to maintain because most of those folks who were experts in maintaining the code in that platform were not, the supply was very limited, so they charged a lot more than they should. So they wanted to shift to something that was more new, where they could bring in someone as much as they needed to at a lower cost. And so I helped them with this from day one. And to be honest, when I worked with a contracting shop to pursue this use case, this example, and to experiment, it wasn't them who found us. We were just launching. But we aligned ourselves with a contracting shop within HHS, and it was actually a contracting officer that gave me a call and said, I think this is what you're looking for. I think this is the one we should work with. And it turned out to be really a good situation. So I use the phrase keeping the train on the track, and I'll explain what I mean here in a minute in terms of agile methodology. But to give you an explanation of sort of how we evolved this, initially the kitchen sink approach is what occurred from this program group. They had a 30-page kitchen sink full of requirements they wanted for their project. I worked with them over time to whittle it down to a little less than 10 pages. Instead of a statement of work, statement of objectives, very results or outcome driven. We worked with a contracting shop because more than 2 companies could do it that were small businesses. We set it aside for small, and we set it at a time and materials basis. The unique thing we did here, even though it's not on the diagram, is went with something a hybrid of nature, and neither the contracting officer nor the program nor myself had ever done this, but we did what was known as a 2-stage down select, which has done a lot more than you might think, just probably not in your respective shops. And basically, you have 2 separate competitive ranges. In stage 1, basically, we put out for 2 weeks this 10-page statement of objectives, as well as some other pieces, the schematics of the current site, and we asked for an 8-page concept paper to be submitted. That's it. Everyone knows that to submit a proposal, 30 pages, it can be a huge time burden and time suck and very expensive for any company, especially small businesses. We received 24 proposals. It was a great number, and it was much easier to evaluate 8 pages than to evaluate 30 pages. The tech panel enjoyed it, the procurement shop enjoyed it, and the way we were shifting here was trying to get away from just solely paper or text-based proposals and focus more on, here's our problem, these are the results we want, tell us in your concept paper how you can achieve this. Once we evaluated that and developed the competitive range, we selected the top 5 companies. We gave them each $10,000 in a little more than 2 weeks and a different set of evaluation factors. And we asked them to deliver us a minimal viable prototype based on that requirement. We also asked for a revised cost proposal and a longer performance work statement on how they could achieve everything. It worked out really, really well. So well to the point that you've probably heard oftentimes when you have a bad experience, you'll tell 10 people. When you have a good experience, you'll tell maybe 5. This program office told, I don't know how many people, 30, 40. And they want to use the same approach every single time, though that's not necessarily the way you should do it. It's all very situational, but I can tell you this worked very well for them. and they really enjoyed the process. They really enjoyed what I'm about to show you is what their $50,000 got them. It enabled them to look at 5 actual sites, to look at the coding, the script, et cetera, utilizing the subject matter experts that they had brought onto their panel. This is 1 of the 5. This is the 2nd of the 5. And this is the 3rd of the 5, but also the winner. And I'll say, you know, we did really well here. We're all very proud of what we accomplished. And sort of going back to keeping the train on the track, to compare it to waterfall, I'll say this. When you have a traditional waterfall-based approach and you ask someone to come back to you in 6 months, and you don't know what they're doing for 6 months, that train can derail, and that costs you a lot of money. And then to bring them back into focus, to bring that train back on the tracks, it takes a lot more time and a lot more money, a lot more effort, frustration, and it leads to failure. The program speaks to the contractor probably on a daily, every other daily basis. They have 2-week sprints. The train has not left the track. The train has gone very well since early October. The best thing about this is when we awarded the contract, we had a prototype. So the initial kickoff meeting was, let's evaluate the prototype. This is where we're going to go. Let's move. So 2 sprints in October, 2 sprints in November, 2 in December, et cetera, et cetera. They're making significant progress because of these agile sprints, and they're loving how it's moving at this pace. So what's next? As I mentioned before, I want to keep engaging with every operating division to help them increase their success rate of acquisition of IT services. I want to develop these little mini buyers club groups within the operating divisions to help them sustain themselves on their own, but also work throughout HHS to improve. But I also want them to garner experience from USDS, from GSA, and every other federal agency that is moving along this path. One of the things that I want to say real quick before I close is I did something very unique at the end of this project that I think is rarely done and I think needs to be changed. As procurement folks know, contractors who do not win solicitations, do not win the award, have an opportunity for a debrief. And we usually provide that to them in a written basis to protect ourselves. What I've never seen done that I did this time is I requested feedback from the contractors. I requested feedback from all 5 that provided prototypes, requested feedback from most of the stage 1 groups, but also some contractors that I thought were going to propose that did not propose. And I basically provided a survey and followed up with them. And I cannot even begin to tell you how much we learned from this. We put this into our use case, which is also available that we can share with you. But I think that every acquisition needs to have this automatic sort of feedback requirement, because otherwise we have no way, if our solicitation was really written wrong, if we left something out, how can we improve? We really should be setting this up to where we're both sharing information. I can tell you the single biggest outcome of this experiment was that the contractors who proposed, whether or not they won, the procurement shop that was involved and led the effort, and the mission end users that were involved, the single biggest aspect of this entire experiment was the prototype phase, was getting to see something and getting to judge companies based on their true capabilities and what they could do in a short amount of time, as opposed to reading a 30-page requirement and really analyze whether or not they could function and perform to the level we needed them to. So in closing, I will say slides and presentations will be posted on fai.gov in about a week after the event or so. But here's our landing page. For all the HHS folks in the room, again, I'm Mark Naggar. That's my email. I would love to talk with you if you have something coming down the pipeline that we can help with. Thank you very much.